Only a cat woman is a good woman. This is how she stays a virgin, yes?
Whereas I don't know what you're talking about.
You're not cat?
What do you mean? Did they cut something away from you?
My name is Waris, and today is the day of my circumcision. It's 1970 in the Somali desert. The sun is scorching gravel and a heat wave fills the air. I'm 3 years old and my mother leads me towards a jumble of rocks. The old woman of the tribe was waiting here early. In her hand, she held a rusty blade and slowly reached for my lower body. My screams tore through the desert silence as the blade touched my skin. There was no anesthetic, no sterilization, just bloody thorns that pierced every inch of my body. My name means desert flower. In Somali, it symbolizes beauty and resilience. At this moment, however, I am nothing more than a weed that has been uprooted, curled up on a sand dune, letting the winds of fate blow by. Vultures circling in the sky descend from the heavens, their eyes fixed on me as if to peck away at the lost parts of me. After the ceremony, I was left on the ground, unattended and uncared for. If I died from blood loss, it was fate. If I had survived, I might have continued to be raised. Luckily, I didn't die. I held on as long as I could. But once again, fate caught up with me. At the age of 12, the pain returned.
way fiican tahay taas waxay muujinaysaa in aad weynaatay waa naag noqotay xanuun kasta u dhammaan.
This time, I was sold by my father to an old man from the next village. For the price of 5 camels, I became his 4th wife. I stared at his incisors that were about to fall out. Disappointment in my eyes. I wasn't happy. This wasn't the life I wanted. So while the night was young, I ran barefoot and wild. My mother stood behind me with tears in her eyes. She didn't stop me because she understood that this was my only chance to escape. At night in the desert, I ran while enduring the stinging pain in the soles of my feet with the endless road in front of me. Sharp stones pierced my skin and gravel cut into my flesh. I don't care about any of this. What's all this pain compared to having me marry that 60-year-old man? When I am sleepy, I lie down on the ground to sleep. And when I am hungry, I just grab some weeds to feed myself. The palms of my feet were already swollen and black, rubbing against the dry and hard, sandy soil. And every step I took spoke of the ruthlessness of fate. After 2 days and a night on the run, I finally stopped a truck by the highway. The driver pretended to be benevolent and agreed to give me a ride. But as night fell, he showed his evil face. In the midst of resistance, I grabbed a rock and smashed it hard on his head, knocking him unconscious before I was able to escape. With all my might, I escaped again and finally found my grandmother in Mogadishu. My grandmother looked at me with heartache in her eyes, but the family did not welcome me. She got me a passport and quietly sent me to faraway England. I became the maid of the Somali ambassador in London. The moment I stepped on that plane and looked at the land that had hurt me, I cried. At that moment, I completely buried the pain of my childhood. During my 6 years in the basement of the Somali embassy, I got used to silence. Whenever it was late at night, I would lie down in front of the door to eavesdrop on the TV and learn English. After cleaning the bathroom, I stood in front of the mirror and giggled. The days were so quiet that it was like the years didn't fluctuate. Until the civil war broke out in Somalia, the quiet days were broken. The embassy demanded the immediate evacuation of all concerned, and I was not to be an exception. I was unwilling to return to that place full of nightmares, so I took out my passport, which was buried in the earth, and fled without hesitation with only a few pieces of clothing. Without the shelter of the embassy, I began to wander the streets of London. I searched garbage cans for mouldy bread and collected coins dropped by strangers in phone booths. Sometimes I even spent the night huddled in a corner with broken cardboard, until the day I met her in a toilet.
Jesus! Fucking Nora! Get out of here now. Never come back or we'll forget we ever saw each other. You out! I'm here!
A British girl with bright red lips and a foul mouth, but a soft heart. Looking at the marks on my body, she actually cried. suddenly said, "You don't have to go through this alone." She took me back to her apartment, and after a long talk with the owner's wife, she finally let me stay the night. I woke up early the next morning. It was the first time I had slept well since coming to London. I tidied up her room and handed over a cup of hot tea to her, who had just woken up. I watched it all with gratitude and relief. She found me a job in a fast food restaurant. It all made me feel that fate was finally starting to take pity on me. That day, I was cleaning. The man sitting in the corner looked at me with a flash of surprise in his eyes. His gaze gave me scrutiny I had never felt before. When I went over, he handed me a business card and he told me he wanted me to be his model. He complimented me on my face that looked like desert cliffs, my eyes that seemed to be sealed with wild amber, and my skin color, which he said was a perfect chocolate brown. I didn't say anything more, just silently tucked the business card away in my pocket. At that moment, I knew that this might be the turning point in my destiny. Over the next few days, Marilyn and I became unspoken friends. We would play around in the apartment, teach each other English in our free time, and live a simple yet cozy life. Until one day, Marilyn received a rejection letter from the dance academy, and she looked lost. It turned out that she had always had a dream of dancing, but no matter how hard she tried, she was always rejected by the school. As I watched her, I couldn't help but feel a little sad. To make her feel better, I suggested that we go dancing together in the evening. Marilyn was on the dance floor, writhing freely to deafening music, as if she was trying to shake off all her anger and resentment. I, on the other hand, stood by, smiling at her. My movements seemed unnatural, even a little formal, but I still didn't want to miss the moment. Just then, a man's figure attracted me. He came over to me and took the initiative to talk to me. Facing his handsome, gentlemanly appearance, my heartbeat sped up. I was slightly moved, but the fear in my heart prevented me from relaxing. In the romantic atmosphere of the dance floor, our distance is getting closer and closer, but I suddenly feel a wave of fear. Without warning, I pushed him away and turned to run away and leave. I ran to the river's edge, breathing heavily, as if only the cool night air could calm my inner turmoil. When I got home, I listened to the voices coming through the door, and at that moment, I felt a sense of shock and even some anger. I began to wonder if maybe she wasn't as nice as I thought she was. I accused her of not deserving it, but she didn't care. She looked over at me and mouthed freedom, but I couldn't understand her. All of this made me realize the difference between me and her and the other girls. Then I lifted my skirt, revealing the scars.
They did not do it to you? Your mother?
They don't do it to anyone here.
At that moment, I suddenly realized that not all women need to go through circumcision. I looked at her as if the world had collapsed, realizing that I was not an innocent young girl, but a body ravaged by a cruel tradition. The next day, Marilyn and I sat on a bench and talked, and I pulled out the business card Donaldson had given me. Marilyn was far more discerning and knowledgeable than I was. She knew that Donaldson was very well known in the industry, and that if I could be seen by him, there would be better opportunities in the future. While we were talking about the future, I felt a sharp pain in my abdomen. Marilyn immediately took me to the hospital, where the doctor told me that the painful aftermath came from the circumcision. As I lay there in that white hospital bed, the doctors were shocked at my physical condition and wanted to help me in any way they could. A male nurse, also from Somalia, was even called in to translate, but the doctor's words through his mouth became like an injury, stabbing me in the heart.
We'll tell her she's doing the right thing. We can fix it.
haddii aad bedesho waxaa tahay waxaa siraysaa waalidka dadkaaga iyo dhaqankaaga isku xishood wejigaaga ma arki karo hooyadaa ma ogta waxaad samaynaysid.
In that moment, my insides broke down and I wanted to run away from it all. The cold winds of London were biting and I was reflected in the store windows. It was a little girl who had once fled in the desert and was now a ghost of civilization. And the girl in the window, like me, seemed unable to really show her face. Grandma once said that going through all this pain is ultimately about getting something worthwhile. Those words echoed in my ears and strengthened my resolve. I went back to the hospital and decided to undergo surgery. The scalpel cut through not only the wounds, but also the ignorance and shackles that kept me lost. As I stood in Donaldson's studio, his business card clutched in my hand, my heart was filled with anticipation. Though I stood there, rattled, the flash stung my eyes and my steps seemed clumsy, but he saw my potential. In me, he saw raw, wild beauty. Donaldson patiently guided me. Slowly, I began to stretch my limbs, and the camera showed me with skin as rough as the desert and eyes that burned with an unquenchable fire. After the shoot, the company's decision put me on a bigger stage. However, when I was about to set foot on the show floor in Paris, my expired passport put me in a difficult situation.
You are fired.
Oi, easy.
I have spent days getting new bookings, and then I discover you're illegal. It is 6 years out of date. You're going to get yourself deported back to your dreary little desert.
It turns out that 6 years ago, my passport expired. Without a legal identity, I could be deported back to Somalia. In order to obtain permanent residency, I decided to get married to Neil under false pretenses. But this fake marriage was not as easy as we thought. In order to cope with the raids by the immigration department, I had to put up with Neil's harassment. The nights I shared the bed with him, I felt bound and my breath almost suffocated. But this humiliating compromise was a gamble I made for my freedom. Finally, I received a letter from the immigration office. At that moment, I put down my ring and said goodbye to my past. Then I boarded the plane to Paris. This girl who once escaped from the desert is now the darling of the fashion world. However, when I faced an interview with the editor-in-chief of a magazine, I revealed my painful past to them.
If I tell you a story, you guarantee me it will be published.
Tell me about the day that changed your life.
I was 3 years old.
Once my interview was published, it quickly attracted global attention that I have finally won the freedom to be reborn in this fire. The blossoming of the desert flower all begins with the tearing of flesh and blood.